Welcome to Real ABM, a podcast for B2B marketing professionals who are looking to use ABM strategies to drive revenue. In each episode, we cover specific ABM plays and remove all of the BS and fluff so you can develop a custom ABM strategy, implement specific ABM tactics, and stand out as a marketer by generating revenue for your company. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to Real ABM. I'm Nick Bennett.
And I'm Pete Larenka.
Today, our guest is Amber Bogie, ABM Manager at Degree. Amber, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. So something we like to do before we dig into your ABM journey is we like to set up the conversation by asking a few questions to get to know you, the company, your current maturity with ABM, to kind of level set for everyone that listens. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about Degree? What do you guys do? What stage are you in terms of company size? And then we can go from there.
Yeah, sounds good. So Degree is a software platform that pretty much promotes and helps upskill employees, helps with career mobility, and ultimately I like to look at it as it's a win-win for companies and for employees. Employees are, getting upskilled. They're having access to career mobility options. They're having career growth within the organization supported. So for longevity within their career, it helps with, tenure and whatnot. Company obviously is getting success by way of upskilling their employees. So that's a little bit about what we do from my perspective. Company size, we are around 500 plus. I was under 300 when I started just about 2 years ago. So we've doubled in size in that time. So it's been rapidly growing.
Amazing. And so, who is your target audience? And I know you mentioned this a little bit, what type of accounts are you going after? And then in addition to that, how big is the marketing team today and how is it structured?
Yeah. So, I'd say we're in a fortunate situation at Degree where our target market is pretty large in terms of, our total addressable market and then, who are actual core ICP who we want to go after. More or less, enterprise, obviously size is what we're looking for, large deals. But it's not particular to industry or anything like that, because every organization has these pain points of wanting to skill up your employees. So not specific to any particular type of company. Our marketing team size is actually quite large for a company of our size. We're over 40 in total. However, the ABM team started as a team of one, as most do, and has grown to a team of 4, which I think, I think that it's been done fast, and it's been a luxury, to be quite frank, to have a team. It's day and night from having it done years and years by myself to having a team. It's oh my God, amazing.
I hear you. I'm solo on that journey right now, but we'll see. We'll see over time. Last question that I have before I toss it over to Pete is, how would you describe the ABM maturity at your company? It's I know you have 4 people. It's do you have some learnings that you're working to optimize? Do you have a strong ABM approach? What's it look like?
Yeah, it's a good question because I feel like the answer, interestingly enough, is different when you look internally and externally. When you ask people, right? It's we're all in marketing. We talk about this stuff all the time. You have conversations with people that are like, oh my God, wow, you are so much, wow, you're doing that. Internally, there's still struggles and there's still, questions around ABM. And so it doesn't feel as mature, but it is a mature strategy. I'd say in terms of maturity, we're definitely at a very mature stage in the sense that I'm trying to go from ABM to ABX. That's where we're at right now, which is it takes maturity to be able to do that. You have to kind of start with. I do say that ABM is ABX and there's no differentiator, but it's almost like a transition phase you have to go through when you're implementing to go from a team to a org-wide strategy.
Absolutely. So Pete, I'll throw it over to you. I know we wanted to go into the struggles and wins.
No, so Amber, thanks. And obviously, I've known you from Peak. I know you got a lot of experience in ABM, so I think this is going to be good. So, you mentioned a second ago you're on your own maturity journey from ABM to ABX. I think to set this up before we kind of dig into that journey itself, how do you define ABM versus ABX? Like, just to kind of level set with the audience, what's your definition?
Yeah, I think that the way I like to define it, and it is funny because I'm just creating definitions here, like a Merriam-Webster dictionary. But what I think is, to me, it's ABM is a team approach. The ABM team is running the strategy. That's how it kind of gets set up. Somehow it's internally kind of communicated. ABX is an organization-wide strategy. It is something that comes from the ABM team, but it is not, the whole responsibility does not lie on the shoulders of the ABM team. And it's because you can see it differently. And to me, that's where the big difference is that we all know as ABMers, we all know it's not a marketing effort. It is a across the organization, no matter which, maturity or where you are, that's how you become successful with it. So it just takes a shift in perspective. And so to me, it's kind of like a growing stage. If you're fortunate and you can start out educating that way from an ABX mindset, which I intend to do, as I go throughout my career and do things elsewhere, I plan to try things differently. But I think that, to me, that's where the difference is really becoming, it's the separation of owned by one team versus the whole company strategy.
Love that definition. So, Amber, obviously you were the first ABM person at Degreed. What were the goals and objectives when you were brought on to help stand up ABM? And then as a follow-up to that, how are you thinking about measuring that success in the beginning? And how did you mentioned a second ago about being an organizational strategy as opposed to being like a marketing specific or marketing standalone strategy? So, and then, around that, how do you ensure alignment with those different parts of the business and alignment to what those core goals or objectives were when you rolled this out in the first place? Just take us through that.
That's a big one. Multifaceted answer. So going back to when I started Degreed, and really a lot of the organizations that I've done this at, I'd love to hear from other people if they, hear this and they have a different experience, but I haven't really been brought into an organization with expectations outside of, we want big wins, big revenue. I've never gone in and they've been like, here's our goal, this is what we need to hit. I've gone in knowing what to do and setting my own goals. And so I've been able to try that in different ways. And the further along I got, so getting to Degreed, I came in and was like, okay, what are our sales goals? Now I need to set benchmarks. I need to look at what we can do. How is the company actually operating and the success of their, pipeline and their close one, and then set benchmarks against that and see, to me, they were internal goals that were set that I kept trying to beat every quarter. And so what I did was I had to get data, and fortunately, metrics along ABM are becoming a lot more, focused on and talked about. But a couple of years ago, everybody was asking the same question: like, what are you measuring? Like, what are we supposed to be measuring? And so I just went ahead and, obviously set my own goals up. But what I did was I had to see what we could do at Degreed. So I started to measure weekly, every single week, like clockwork. I'd look at all ABM accounts and then campaign accounts. And so I wanted to see the growth in both areas. Obviously, I knew campaigns were going to have a certain impact, but going the ABX route, what are all ABM accounts? Like, what's the impact on the education and enablement within the organization? How salespeople are taking, the data, acting on it, and seeing results. So I'd be watching week over week all ABM MQAs, campaign MQAs, meetings, pipeline, opportunity. So every week, and then I started to watch and see patterns. ultimately, I set my goals around, hitting a certain percentage of the sales pipeline that was, measured each quarter or each year. And my goal was to continue to grow up that percentage to get to, 6% higher the next quarter. We started out at like 13% our first quarter and have gotten to over 30%, attribution.
Awesome. That's great. So let's dig into it then. Let's get into the meat of how you've done that. So I think to start, Amber, knowing that's been a journey for you, what's that evolution for ABM to ABX look like for you and Degreed, right? You mentioned earlier on this, your team has grown. Kudos to you. That's always good news. But I think to start, where did you spend a lot of your time in the beginning knowing you're a team of one? And how has that changed now that you lead a team of four? And what have been the hardest parts for you in terms of building this out and really kind of going on that journey, if you will, to an ABX?
Yeah. Well, I'd say the single hardest part when you're a team of one, and really even as a growing team, is finding the balance between running marketing activities, campaigns, which is what our jobs are, but not ignoring the massive responsibility that is sales enablement. And I think that there's a big loss in many organizations within their strategy where enablement's not a focus enough. We need to be able to teach them to fish. And if we don't, we're going to be doing it all the time. And we can't scale. We can't scale if we do it all. So that's what I'd say, is the biggest challenge. Having to run campaigns and enable a sales team of 100 with one, it's like, no, that's not possible. I can't call myself. I wish. So as we grew, I identified where our biggest pain points. It always comes down to like, who do you hire first? That's a people question I get sometimes. And it's a kind of a toss up, and it depends on what your company structure is and what support you have. But to me, it comes down to operations and enablement. And I've actually initially planned on bringing a campaign manager on first. And then I realized, well, how impactful are the campaigns going to be if I don't have somebody to enable them? So we ended up shifting our hiring to bring on a sales enablement manager. And so I will now build out teams with an ABM sales enablement manager because I see the value in what it brings to the team. So that's kind of, where our growth has come from. We fortunately had operations support, so I didn't have to go the decision between the two, which operations would come first. If I had to decide. But then, bringing on sales enablement, and that has been where I've seen the most growth moving to that ABX strategy is with that support and that constant enablement. You have new hires, you have onboarding, you have constant need for enablement. It doesn't go away once you teach people that, have started. There's constantly, education around campaigns, reasons, strategy, messaging, everything. It's a big part of it. In addition to what I refer to as translating the data, we take all of this data and we just dump it on our salespeople with too many reports in the inbox. And there's certainly an expectation to act on it. And I do have high expectations, let me tell you, but we do have to do the work to get them there.
I will say we've done a few of these now, and operations comes up consistently. I know James Gilbert well, and James talked a lot about ops. Yeah. The sales enablement one we haven't heard a lot of yet. So I love that perspective, and I would personally agree and say it definitely seems like a gap that most of us on the sales and marketing side. I'm married to a seller, so maybe I'm a little bit biased towards this as well. But I know that I hear that complaint a lot. I could probably get her and she'd come on and tell you that.
Yeah, I think that as ABMers, we are an arm of sales. We have to think about ourselves as part of the sales team. We can't think about ourselves as a separate group. And so once that shift changes, then you start to really be able to see like what their needs are. Ultimately, we have to be honest. Like salespeople are the first line out, with your customers. They need to be well prepared, and to bring on, a certain strategy that requires a certain level of, personalization, messaging, usage of data. We have to give them the tools that they need to be successful if we have expectations about, setting up pipeline. In addition to that, one thing that I think that we're really good at forgetting, and I love to speak on behalf of all marketers, but we speak a different language, and we need to learn each other's languages. I am the first to recognize where my own shortcomings are within the sales process, sales language, all of that. We need to have a translator. But we need to understand. It's really critical for the marketing team to understand the sales process at your organization, what happens throughout each stage. What are you hearing back from prospects, and what are your pain points beyond just general product marketing knowledge, and they also, it's important for them not to have down into the detail, because that's just too much. But, explaining intent data is not the easiest thing in the world, even though it's really not that, it's for us, intent data, of course. It's not just easy for everybody when they're in a whole different mode of operating, right? So it's just being more human throughout the process. I think it's just beneficial.
I think you've given us one of our snippets for how do we promote your episode, but we'll see if we can cover a few more here. But so obviously a favorite of most marketers is the channels, the tactics, right? What have you done, Amber, that's worked? So I'm not expecting you're going to go into full detail. We as marketers like to keep some of this close to our chest, but for you at Degreed, and when you think about your experience with ABM, can you help us all understand, what are some of the channels that you've seen work or be effective? Why did you choose those particular types of channels? And has that strategy or approach that you've used to different channels or tactics evolved over time? And if so, why have you tweaked it?
Yeah. I've always chosen, in terms of, channels and tactics, I guess if it ain't broke, don't fix it, is some of the kind of methodology I live by. But what I choose is dependent on what our strategy is and what our goals are within the organization. So, same tactics, but different lens, like one-to-one versus, a little bit more one-to-many, lighter messaging. So for me, the channels that we're using, mostly digital. I mean, I'd say digital is pretty much where it is. And, the world that we're living in being, a remote world. But I've always been more of a digital kind of fan. I am a big fan of direct mail. It has been a bit of a challenge this last year. But I'd say, I guess for me, it's less about the channels and the tactics, and it's more about the messaging resonating. I feel like when I look back at the successful campaigns I've run, it's not because they saw it on a screen. It's not because they got it in their hands. It's because of what they got and what it meant to them. And I think that is really the key to getting into, to breaking through the doors is why does it matter to them? Whether that's wholly personal to that unique person, or if it's very specific to the company's goals and objectives. That's always been my route, is figuring out what matters to them. And so I've done some great, really amazing one-to-one pieces that I had a salesperson say, this closed the deal. That's a big one, especially getting that statement. But so that whole project, that was just a single asset. I mean, we had it electronically delivered, but it was personalized down to the 5 company goals and objectives, taking quotes from the CEO of the organization, pasting it on the left-hand page, let's say. Right page had success metrics from customers in the same industry. So it was, here's what your leader said about where you're trying to go. Here's how we got there with this other company in your market. So really putting it in front of them, what value is there for them? To me, that's what it's all about.
Amber, you mentioned you would evolve your channels and tactics based on strategy, right? One-to-one versus maybe one-to-few, or what some people might refer to as ABM light.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, if you were guiding somebody who's fresh with ABM, let's just say Nick doesn't know what he's doing, and some days I'm not sure he does. Okay. How would you guide Nick in terms of the types of channels you should think about in terms of a more one-to-one approach, or the experience that you might be trying to deliver versus maybe a one-to-many or one-to-few?
Yeah, I'd probably, to be honest, suggest using digital. I would suggest, having display, LinkedIn ads, custom landing pages. I am a big fan of direct mail. So I do think direct mail and or, certain sort of VIP events are really great, but all of that is dependent on what is your sales force size? How many people are you supporting? What is your account list? How many accounts are you actually going after? What is your expectation around that? So I think that if your organization is saying we need to scale, we need all of our sales reps to be doing this, and you've got 100 sales reps, and so you've got 1,000 accounts, then I'm going to say, all right, you break it into three areas of the funnel. You do, you've got, more top of funnel. I, refer to partnership with demand generation, more traditional tactics. Middle of funnel, I do, one to many, or like intent-based campaigns, and then one-to-one. So in my opinion, the goal should be to get to a maturity phase always. And the goal should always be to consider all areas of the funnel and all campaign types, and not have to determine, we only do one because of X or Y. It's no, we do one because of this, we do another because of that. So it's situational. So I obviously have to, know how many salespeople Nick's supporting, how many accounts, but then I would do, a long-term strategy. And I'm kind of a fan of starting from one-to-many and going down funnel. But other people have different experiences. I've done one-to-one only at an organization, and it was amazing campaigns we had. But there is I'd say in some ways it's like setting yourself up for failure because you can't scale. And so you can only do so much. So I go the other, I've gone the other way. But also, you've got pilots, which I know lots of people run pilots, and that's good to just kind of test and evangelize within the organization. But knowing what direction I needed to go at Degreed, I said, we're just going to start here. We're just going to start top and go down.
That's great. I love that guidance. Let me ask you one more, and then we'll see what Mr. Bennett's got to add. So obviously one of the other big topics around ABM, and you know as well, is measurement, right? Mm-hmm. How do you determine success? What should you measure? So as best you are comfortable sharing, whether it's at Degreed or how you think about ABM as a whole, how do you tell ABM is working, and what types of results or success metrics do you look for? I think you referenced it a little earlier, but I'm curious if you could elaborate any further.
Yeah. And this is another one where I'd love to hear what other people have to say. I am not looking I'm not looking for a single source attribution when I'm looking at my measurement, because ABM is a combination of all efforts across the organization and how they impact as a whole. So to me, I'm looking at, you're starting out, I'm looking at, once you start ABM day one, you're measuring engagement, and then you're looking year back. What was the engagement? Once you start seeing, MQAs, meetings, opportunities, for the whole first year, I looked back at the previous year. I did that to get a baseline of what impact we were making with our efforts, because they were same accounts, ABM accounts, with and without a strategy. We saw 3x pretty much across the board.
Yep.
With that. And then I also wanted to do a comparison and validation of our ABM accounts. So lots of different organizations have ABM accounts, and then their sales force also has their tier 1 accounts, or, kind of like their territory priorities, which that's a whole nother conversation around why we do lists. But I did the same thing. I looked at the present day of those metrics between those two sets of accounts, and our opportunity size and conversion was so much higher. It was, and 3 is the magic number, I guess, because it was 3x opportunity, 3x engagement, and the conversion to opportunity was also higher. So that's how I look at it starting out. Now, once you kind of get into, the routine of things, I'm looking at how accounts are engaging, but I am only using that as a signal reader. I refer to the MQA, which when anyone asks what an MQA is, I'm like, an MQA is an MQL on steroids. That's what it is. Because everybody has a historic knowledge of MQL for the most part. So I'm looking at an MQA as a turn left here. So as a pay attention, take action. I don't really have the expectation of salespeople reaching out until an account MQAs. I think that enough, information and whatnot needs to be gathered. But so I always measuring MQAs, but that's not a determination of success. That's a signal pointer. And then in terms of success metrics, it really is, for me, it's pretty simple in the beginning, what are your meetings, what is your opportunities, what are your pipeline, and what are the conversion rates between those two? Constantly looking at the conversion rates between, so that you can get actually set up for setting up real goals based on your success rates from the past. And then once you get further down into the maturity, that's when I think you have enough data. This takes a long time, but once you start closing deals, you can start measuring the velocity and conversion, the deal close size and whatnot. So that takes a while. We're still working on building up more and more information on that. But from what we've gathered, we have seen an impact for sure. Because again, your sales leaders sometimes are like, yes, more pipeline. But oftentimes you'll get sales leaders that say, well, we want to make these deals go faster. So we want to close them quick. So my argument back to that is, well, these are 3x opportunities, so there's maybe a little bit of a lag time. No, I think in reality, I'd love to hear from others on velocity of enterprise deals, because they are generally longer. You have large deals and multi-million-dollar deals. They do take a little bit of time. You do have a lot of buyers involved. So I think that needs to be paid attention to. That velocity can be impacted, but you also have to look at the deal size.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I feel like I made the mistake of going after that 1-to-1 instead, and really kind of backing myself against a wall of not being able to scale. And I'm now fixing that mistake, but I realized it the last 3-4 months. I've been focused on that 1-to-1 piece, and I'm stuck now of needing more, and I'm stuck at scale, and I'm now kind of backing off that and more focusing on that 1-to-few and 1-to-many. And I mean, I can tell it's already going to be making a huge difference from a number perspective. So that's definitely great feedback there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, as said in ABM is B2B, some accounts deserve sparkling waters, others deserve champagne. And so that's kind of the same methodology there, where 1-to-1 is awesome. And it's a ton of fun for marketers, I think. But not everybody needs to get 1-to-1. And a lot of impact can happen in lighter lift campaigns. I mean, we've got an intent campaign running that I refer to as the accidental success. I mean that, and just by way of, we wanted to fill the funnel. We wanted all ABM accounts in the funnel. So we're like, okay, let's come up with a campaign for that. Ended up testing out an intent-based campaign. Hadn't done one before. It's over 3 months generated think it was 1.5 million. I don't know offhand, 20 something meetings, but not a lot of effort aside from obviously building the campaign had to go into it. And I guess if you look at ABM as like building a flywheel, you want to get the, certain things in place so that they can run on their own so that you can focus on one-to-ones. So it's just kind of like covering all your bases and making sure that certain accounts in certain stages get certain account behavior or certain account treatment, campaigns. As they move through the funnel, that kind of changes. But I think that, mistakes aren't necessarily mistakes. They're just learnings on how to optimize, because I probably am where I am because I've made quite a few mistakes along the way. And it's only made me wiser and figure out how to do it better next time.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And that kind of actually brings me to like my next question, because I feel like, let's go into tools, and you don't, unless you're comfortable, have to actually say the name of the tool, but like, what does your ABM stack look like from an intent perspective, automation? Like, what are you using?
Yeah. So I came into Degreed the luckiest gal alive. We were already a really tech-friendly company, and so I did not have to do too much. I brought on, once I got there, I think just 2 tools. I brought on Terminus and I brought on Uberflip. We had already had Sendoso. We had already had Engagio, now demand-based. We had already had Sigster, now email experiences. Lots changed in a couple of years. But we had all the big ones covered. We had data platforms. So I just had to come in and kind of do an inventory of what we were using and how we were using it. And we have a RevOps function, so there was a lot of value to having that already set up in place. But for me, I'm like, you need to read engagement, so you need a tool for that. How are you measuring your accounts? Like you got to do that. You need to set up an MQA. You got to have a trigger for that. You need a platform that allows you to create personalized experiences. So for me, that's Uberflip all the way. There's lots and lots of tools out there that support in that. And then direct mail is, it is an important part of your strategy. So everyone can obviously determine which direct mail tools are best suited for them. I think that each of them have a lot of strengths, because I don't think they're all just like apples to apples. I think that they're more like apples to kiwis. I don't know, something else slightly different. I couldn't come up with something on the spot. But anyway, so intent's an interesting one for me. I have used intent tools throughout the years, and I've always just gotten the benefit of intent by way of another tool built in. Now, I do have a friend who, has an extremely powerful ABM strategy. It's a ABM support software tool. They use Sixth Sense, and they don't use Engagio demand-based. So that's sort of opened up some, thought doorways for me, because I've only ever used Engagio throughout my entire, ABM journey. So, there obviously Sixth Sense is very intent-heavy platform. But what's interesting and also very challenging for us out there is every tool is now every tool. So how do you differentiate between the tools? Because they all do it all, right? I think that what I do when I'm evaluating a tool is I say, where did you get your start? That's what you're going to be strongest at, and everything else is an add-on, and you have to evaluate how well they've worked into that add-ons. We all know, if we've come from acquisition companies, internally what it's like to take on a new tool, and sometimes it takes time before you kind of get the kinks out. But ultimately I look at where did you start, and how well known are you, and do I trust your brand presence, your brand awareness within the community.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I use Sixth Sense without any other tools currently.
Yeah.
And this is the third company where I've strictly done that.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm pretty good with it. Although, be remiss if I didn't say, like, I do wish I had like other like platforms to be able to like add to that. But I mean, I've been able to be successful with just that. But I don't even have like an Uber flip or something. I'm doing a lot of this manually right now too, just because of like the stage where we are from like a company perspective.
Yeah, definitely manual. I'm like, anyone asks me about, starting smaller, having no budget, I'm like, you can do ABM. Like, I call popsicle sticks and glue. Like, I've done it before. It's hard, but you can do it. You just have to be aware of like, well, what tools I have in my box. Like, I've got popsicle sticks and I have glue. Okay, what are we gonna build? And then you go to a place like Degreed where you've got like the Taj Mahal of all the tools. So I think there's a lot of value in bootstrapping the ABM strategy. It is hard, but you learn a lot of valuable things along the way that you don't if you just start from a tool-based experience. It's like going backwards. It's like you don't want to start in the richest place in the world because then you're not going to appreciate. More so, you're not going to see some of the holes that the tools are supporting you. And you can catch those if you've seen them before because you built it yourself.
Amber, if you had to say you couldn't live without one tool, you don't have to name the vendor, but if you said there's one tool from an ABM perspective that you can't give up these days, which of those buckets, or if you feel comfortable, vendors would it be, and why?
I'd say that's really hard to pick one. Because I'm like two.
Two? I can take two.
Okay. So I'd say it comes down to two needs: measuring your engagement and then building an experience for them. So for me, it's been Engagio, now demand-based, which is going to take me some time to get just used to calling it demand-based only. But engagement, which you can obviously do with lots of other tools. And then that experience is Uberflip. And I come from the what I call Frankensteining landing pages background. So having done both, that is such a massive, massive thing for me to have the ease of use to create personalized experiences. So yeah, those are my two.
That's amazing. I can definitely feel you there. So I know we're coming up on time, but I have a few final questions for you. And I feel like this is something that I love, like when people talk like tactical to me. And so like, do you have a favorite ABM campaign that you run at Degreed, and like what makes it memorable?
That's hard. If I'm picking my favorite one at Degreed, oh God. Okay. I guess I'm just going to say two and you guys can pick when you guys have it. Okay. So one of them is the first one that we ever did, and it's called the Pivot Campaign. It dropped right when Corona did. So we pivoted our strategy around it. That one is a really fun and memorable one because it was a choose your own adventure campaign. So if you don't have the ability to scale one-to-one, for these accounts, then let them, have their one-to-one, right? So they got to a landing page where they got to self-select based on their pain points. And then from there, we switched up the ads and the landing pages that they went to based on their selections. And kind of pain points. The other one that I'd love to share is it's a recent one, and the reason it's memorable and worthwhile is because it's very significant to me around ABM to ABX. It's actually a top of funnel campaign that we are doing in total partnership with our demand generation team, and so we're doing a massive campaign to a massive list based on sales targets that we're trying to get. And so the experience was sales coming to me and saying, hey, so can we do ABM to like 2,000 accounts? And I was like, no, but yes. And here's how. We will not do this, but it makes sense from this perspective. So we partnered with the campaigns team, and we ended up building a campaign that's like this. It starts with traditional demand generation tactics, and then it moves to ABM, more of an ABM experience. So starting with like drives to a blog post, having form fills, and then moves to an ungated experience based around their maturity level. We identified their maturity level globally based on our markets. And then our goal for that campaign, because it was top of funnel, was building engagement. So we took all the subset of the groups. So there were 2,000 accounts, but we built this out in different sections. And the first subset was immature and unaware. So our goal actually was based on getting them to an MQA stage. So that one to me is just a fun one because it was really complicated.
Definitely sounds like it. That's awesome. So to wrap up these sessions, we kind of go into some like practical tips and advice based on your learnings with ABM across your journey. And so like the first thing that I like to talk about is like, what are mistakes people make with ABM in general?
I could say a few. I think that, well, one mistake I think that we have to kind of correct as marketers is internally evangelizing it as account-based marketing. I think that goes into the second kind of more, the problem I run into all the time is trying to fit ABM in a box. And you can't put ABM in a corner. So it's overcomplicating what it is. It's trying to define it in such a strict term. And I just don't feel that that's beneficial to anyone. I feel like it slows down your sales enablement process. I feel like it confuses marketers who aren't ABMers because they're trying to think of what is this thing that's so different from what I do. And it's not that complicated. It's really just taking a group of accounts, looking at data, and then looking holistically at the account versus leads. And so I think that like the best advice I could give is it's not that complicated, and to try not to feel like you need to define it so like down to the tooth and nail expression. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I love that. I completely agree. And I've got kind of like one final question for you. And I feel like this is something that not like we're all marketers, I feel like not a lot of people talk about this randomly. And so if you're building out a team to help implement and run ABM, like what skill sets or experience would you be hiring for?
Yeah, that's a good one. When I've been looking to hire and build my team, I was looking for people with ABM experience. I'm not gonna lie, like I needed it. It's completely dependent on your team and where you are within a maturity. You don't have to have ABM experience to do ABM. The first two people on my team didn't, but they were also internal moves versus external hires. So they worked alongside me, and I was in a situation where I was like, yes, I can invest in this process because, like I said, it's not you don't have to fit it in a box. Because as marketers, everybody can get ABM. Like it's not something that you need a special skill set. It's a passion, right? So I understand traditional demand gen, but it's not a passion as the way that ABM is. So when I'm looking to hire externally, I am looking for somebody who believes in what ABM is, because that is a differentiator between someone who just wants to get on the train. Is the passion component, is being able to really see it.
I love that. That's really good. Amazing. Pete, do you have any final thoughts? Anything for Amber?
No, Amber, this has been great. You're a wealth of knowledge. So I first, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
If we were to point people to how they can learn more about you or follow you, where would you guide people to?
Well, I mean, the easy canned is LinkedIn, but Peak Community is where you actually really find me. It's where I spend most of my time when I'm not working or in the yoga studio. That's where I am, because there's tons of events and tons of marketers that are talking about ABM. So if they're interested, that's where I am.
Amazing. Well, Amber, thank you for spending some time with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.